Struzzi. I'm the Coalitions Director with Americans for Prosperity Pennsylvania. And as part of our Prosperity is Possible tour, I'm touring around Pennsylvania talking about energy issues. And one of the issues here is the power plant shutdown. Behind me is the Homer City power plant. It was the largest coal-fired power plant in Pennsylvania and is closed down effective July. And we're going to be meeting with the State Representative Jim Struzzi to talk about that shutdown soon and how it's impacting energy not only in Pennsylvania but across the country.
And I'm standing here with State Representative Jim Struzzi. We are in front of the Homer City power plant, which shut down last month. It was the largest coal-generated power plant in the state. Representative Struzzi, I read that it closed for various reasons, from pollution to excessive environmental regulations to uncertainty of RGGI, cheaper gas, mild winters, all contributing factors. What do you say is the reason this power plant shut down?
I think it's a number of factors. The Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative is one of the main factors. The threat of the looming carbon tax on an industry like coal-fired electric generation for the past 4 years under the Wolf administration simply convinced the owners of the power plant to invest elsewhere, to not continue to invest in this power plant. You combine that with excessive subsidies from the federal government for solar and wind, unfair factors in the PJM grid itself as far as the bidding process, and the fact that the power plant is old. It needed capital investment to continue. You have low natural gas prices right now. You have nuclear energy. It was simply all those factors combined. And then I really do think, though, the federal government, with their upcoming additional environmental regulations combined with the Greenhouse Gas Initiative, really was what pushed it over the edge.
China is making more coal power plants than they have in the last 7 years. I read it's the equivalent of about 2 new coal power plants per week. That was from energy data organizations like Global Energy Monitor and the Center for Research in Energy and Clean Air. The country of China quadrupled the amount of coal power plants from 2021 to 2022. Is China able to produce coal in a more environmentally friendly way than the United States?
Absolutely not. They have zero regulations as far as the environment in China. So shutting down the Homer City generating station is going to do nothing to change air cleanliness. It's going to do nothing to stop pollution. And let's remember that, as I said earlier, this power plant invested millions of dollars to comply with federal regulations. The federal government simply keeps moving the goalpost. The people who want to shut down this power plant have never been here. They've never seen the operation. They don't know how clean it actually is. And to think that China is going to produce cleaner energy than the United States with our regulations is ridiculous. And the environmental policy in this country and these environmental groups need to realize that unless you're taking it from a global perspective, punishing our industries here in Pennsylvania is going to do nothing to affect climate change.
What kind of job loss were we looking at here?
It's been devastating. Once it was announced I believe they announced in February or March that they were going to be shutting down in July. You're talking 129, 130 direct jobs here on the plant. You're talking hundreds of ancillary jobs in the trade unions that come here to do electrical work, the Boilermakers, the IBEW. And then you're talking even more jobs in the local community, just from all the tax dollars that this plant generates, all the family sustaining jobs that it generates are going elsewhere. That means they're not going to restaurants, they're not going to local entertainment, they're not shopping in our stores. So it's a devastating impact across this community. The Homer City or the Homer Center School District is going to lose between $750,000 and $800,000 in taxes. The local township is going to lose $60,000. That doesn't sound like a lot, but it is for a small municipality in a rural.
That's a lot for a school.
Yeah, in a rural area, it absolutely is. And so this has a lot of people concerned. It truly makes zero sense when you think about the base load energy that this power plant contributes to the grid. It's essential, it's needed, and it's not going to be here anymore.
So where are people going for jobs now?
They're going to other states. We held a policy hearing here in Homer City back in June, the House Republican Caucus Policy Committee on Energy Production and the impacts of the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. And we heard directly from the Boilermakers that they have already started sending their good-paying trade union jobs to Ohio and West Virginia because those states embrace fossil fuels. They invest in energy production, whereas Pennsylvania, for years now, has basically punished energy production.
Well, and not just coal. I mean, so a lot of people say we should be moving from coal to natural gas because it's cleaner. I was in the town of Renovo, where Bechtel canceled a construction of a natural gas power plant due to 9 years of litigation from environmental groups that, as you mentioned, weren't even from Pennsylvania, they were from other states. With the closure of Homer City, the cancellation of Renovo, are there questions for power grid reliability?
There absolutely are, and there should be. You saw what happened in Texas. You saw what happened in California. Rolling blackouts. During the recent winter storm we had over Christmas. If it wasn't for coal-fired electric generation, people's lights would not have been on, their Christmas trees would not have been lit up, and they would not have had heat because natural gas couldn't produce, wind and solar were non-existent, and it was the coal-fired electric generation plants here in western Pennsylvania that carried that base load that kept Christmas.
So
basically.
we really need an all-inclusive policy.
You absolutely do. You can't, I have always said from the beginning, since I started fighting against the Greenhouse Gas Initiative, that I support all types of energy production, but you need them all.
Right.
And you need the base load that you get from natural gas, coal and nuclear, and then you can subsidize that with solar and wind. But if you look at the grid right now, the vast percentage of energy production is coming from natural gas, coal, and nuclear. Solar, wind, and hydro are very small, and because they're unreliable. You need the wind and you need the sun. Whereas when you have fossil fuels, you have that base load energy that's there when you need it, on demand.
Now, you mentioned RGGI, and I know what that is, but for those people watching who don't understand what that is, can you just describe briefly what that is?
Sure. The Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative is a multi-state compact wherein they basically tax carbon emissions. And that doesn't apply only to energy production. It applies to manufacturers, anyone that has emissions. So it really is a tax on emissions, and ultimately I think that was one of the main reasons that this plan announced they were going to shut down. I think a lot of us were hopeful that with Governor Shapiro taking office that the Greenhouse Gas Initiative will go away. He had said during the campaign that he thought RGGI was bad for Pennsylvania, and with Wolf stepping aside, we were hopeful that would basically go away. It's held up in the courts right now, but then when the governor came out with his budget address in February, it was part of his budget, $640 million tax.
Revenue?
Yeah, and that's a tax. And so a month later, this plan announces they're going to close in July. So I think it was a direct factor in the fact that the corporation that owns this company out of New York said, we're not going to invest in Pennsylvania if they're going to tax us. And I think it would have cost this power plant something like $30 million. And who do you think would pay for that? If they were to stay in existence, that will be passed on to the consumers. All of the states that are in the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative saw their consumer energy prices increase. Do we want to do that to people at a time when inflation is so high, when energy bills are already higher than almost double in some cases than they were last year, when people can't put food on their table, and we want to talk about taxing energy production? Again, it makes zero sense.
Well, in our efforts to survey constituents, around the country, not just the state, that is still a number one issue of their concern, is rising prices, inflation, food, gas, energy. I mean, it's at the top of everyone's minds still.
Absolutely, and it should be.
Well, you've been a champion for removing Pennsylvania from RGGI, and you've introduced House Bill 195. Can you tell us what that bill would do?
Yes, Governor Wolf in October of 2019 announced that he was going to enter Pennsylvania into the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative via executive order. We just said it's a tax. Clearly, it is a tax, and in our Constitution, only the General Assembly can enact the tax. The governor does not have that power. So by him doing that, basically, and this is what we've been arguing in court, is that it's unconstitutional. He doesn't have the power to enter into the Greenhouse Gas Initiative. So last session, I introduced House Bill 2025 that basically says that any multi-state compact like the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative must be introduced as a piece of legislation vetted through the General Assembly, the House and Senate, before it can be enacted in Pennsylvania. That's what House Bill 2025 did. That's what House Bill 195 does this session. Last session, House Bill 2025 passed with bipartisan support through the General Assembly, went to Governor Wolf's desk where he vetoed it. So basically, he said to 253 representatives of the communities in Pennsylvania, both parties, I don't care what you think, I'm doing it my way. That to me is a blind approach to leadership, not leadership at all when you think about the impacts that it's had on our local community, on our Commonwealth, on the fact that, thousands of jobs have gone to other states, millions in tax dollars, all because of bad policy, bad energy policy here in Pennsylvania.
Yes. Thank you for championing that bill. Given the threats to the energy industry brought on by the Biden administration and Harrisburg, how can we allow for energy abundance and protect an all-of-the-above approach to energy?
Well, first of all, we need to get rid of the extreme environmental approach that basically puts environmental policy in control of everything. I think that you need to have energy policy and environmental policy that mesh together. We can produce clean energy with fossil fuels if we allow that to occur, if we invest in energy production. We can't allow these extremes groups from other parts of the country to come in here and dictate to Pennsylvania how we're going to produce energy. And you can do it cleanly. This power plant, as I said, invested millions and millions of dollars to do it cleanly. They just keep changing the rules. And these groups have no idea. I say, you know, people think that milk comes from the grocery store. People think electricity comes from the wall. You know, it has to be produced. And if you get down to the nuts and bolts of it, you know, in that policy hearing, we heard from people at the highest levels of energy production. They get it, you know, and they basically told us, you know, if you don't change your energy policy in Pennsylvania, or create energy policy in Pennsylvania that, you know, actually supports energy production, we're going to other states that do. And we've already seen that occur. So I think people need to sit down. We need to realize that we can produce energy in a clean manner that's environmentally friendly. We don't need to be extreme. We don't need to shut down fossil fuels completely. We can and should support alternative energy resources and renewables, but it all needs to mesh together to provide grid reliability, to create the jobs and the potential we have here in Pennsylvania, and to take advantage of the vast natural resources we have under our feet.
Well, it sounds like a lot of common sense policy to me. And I thank you for joining us, because hopefully, you know, through making this video, we can get that word out to the community and to Pennsylvanians and just people all over the country, so that we can have a more common sense approach to energy for the benefit of all of us.
Great.
So thank you, Representative.
Yeah, thank you for being here.